Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress as I'm recording this video on Thursday the 8th of April. It is only 11 days till the resumption of the 2020-2021 Candidates Tournament and I am very excited. I hope you are too. This event is the conclusion of the 29th candidate cycle in the history of the official and undisputed World Championship, and on Chess to Impress we're counting down by looking at all 28 earlier candidate cycles, and the playlist of all those videos is up here. The players that will do battle in the 2020-21 Candidates Tournament from the top left clockwise are Fabiano Caruana, Ding Liren, Alexander Grishuk, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Kirill Alexeyenko, Wang Hao, Anish Giri and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And it is Vachier-Lagrave and Nepomniachtchi who are leading the tournament halfway. Of course, the tournament got cut short in March 2020 because of the outbreak of the corona pandemic. 4 players are a full point behind with 7 rounds to play: Caruana, Giri, Wang Hao and Grishuk. And Ding and Alexeyenko will need a miracle to qualify to challenge Magnus Carlsen for the world title in November 2021. As said, on Chess to Impress we're looking at the candidate cycles in history, and it all started in 1883 where Zukertort and Steinitz finished in the first 2 places in that tournament, and they played the first official World Championship match 3 years later. Wilhelm Steinitz gained the right for a rematch against world champion Emanuel Lasker in the St. Petersburg tournament in 1895-1896, and Paul Keres from Estonia won the tournament in the Netherlands 1938 to qualify for a match against world champion Aljechin. Unfortunately for Keres, that match never happened because of World War II interfering. David Bronstein was Botvinnik's challenger by winning the candidates event in Budapest and Moscow in 1950, and Vasily Smyslov won 2 candidate cycles in 1953 and 1956. Misha Tal was Botvinnik's next challenger, and Tigran Petrosyan qualified by winning the candidates tournament on Curaçao in 1962. Boris Spassky also won 2 candidate cycles. First he lost to Petrosyan in the World Championship match, and the second time he beat Petrosyan to become world champion. Bobby Fischer beat Petrosyan in Buenos Aires 1971 to qualify for the match of the century against Spassky 1 year later. Anatoly Karpov beat Viktor Korchnoi in Moscow 1974 to qualify for a World Championship match against Fischer. Fischer didn't play. Karpov became the 12th world champion by default. Korchnoi was not finished. He won the next 2 cycles but lost each time to Karpov in the World Championship match. And there we have Kasparov coming on the scene. He qualified in 1984 for a match against Karpov and became the 13th world champion 1 year later. Karpov won the next 2 cycles. In total, Karpov and Kasparov played 5 matches against each other, and Nigel Short broke that era. He was Kasparov's next challenger in 1993. In 1995 it was Anand's turn to challenge Kasparov, and it should have been Alexei Shirov who beat Kramnik in 1998, who would get a match against Kasparov, but that never happened. Kramnik did get a match. He beat Kasparov in the year 2000 and became the 14th world champion. Peter Leko was Kramnik's first challenger by winning Dortmund 2002, and 2 years later he almost beat Kramnik to become world champion. Elista 2007 was a candidate cycle where 4 players qualified for the World Championship tournament. Those were Aronyan, Gelfand, Grishuk and Leko, and we looked at that cycle in the last video. Anand won the World Championship tournament. 1 year later he beat Kramnik in a match. There was no candidate cycle for that event, so it's not on this list. And in 2009 Topalov was Anand's opponent, and it's in red there because this video is about that cycle. Gelfand and Carlsen were Anand's next 2 opponents, and Carlsen won. He beat Anand to become the 16th world champion. Anand came back, won the next cycle, qualified for a rematch against Carlsen, and Karyakin and Caruana were Carlsen's last 2 opponents. So who will it be? Yekaterinburg 2020-2021. It's going to be very exciting, and you can tell me in the comments who you think will be Carlsen's next challenger. As said, we're going to look at the candidate cycle from 2009, resulting in a World Championship match Anand Topalov in 2010. In 2006, FIDE announced the World Championship 2006 to reunify the World Chess Championship. The classical champion Kramnik defeated the FIDE champion Topalov in that event. After many adventures, you may remember it, Toilet Gate. And because of the organization of the 2007 World Championship tournament was largely in place, conditions of that match included that if Kramnik defeated Topalov, which happened, Kramnik would take Topalov's place in the 2007 World Championship tournament. As compensation, Topalov would have special privileges in the 2010 cycle. To choose the challenger, FIDE organized the World Cup 2007. And Topalov got direct entry to a challenger match against the winner of that World Cup. The winner of the challenger match would then be the official challenger to Anand, all very complicated in those years. It was Gata Kamsky who earned the right to play in a challenger match by winning the World Cup 2007. And the challenger match was an 8-game match between Topalov and Kamsky, played in Sofia, Bulgaria, between the 16th and the 28th of February 2009. And Topalov won. As you can see, Topalov won 3 games, Kamsky only won 1 game, and game 8 didn't need to be played because Topalov had the 4.5 points already. It was a very tense match, and in this video we're going to look at the last game of the match, Game 7. It is the 26th of February 2009, white is Veselin Topalov with a rating of 27.96 and his opponent is Gata Kamsky with a rating of 27.25. Topalov is white and he opened with the e-pawn, and Topalov's second, the Dutch Grandmaster Erwin Lamy, analyzes this crucial game in the magazine New in Chess, which he called a game full of drama. Let's see what happened. Kamsky played the French. The French is not a very common choice at the highest level, but Kamsky had good results with it in this match. He always was able to survive the opening with black without too many problems. d4, d5, knight d2 and c5. We have the Tarrasch variation of the French on the board. And Erwin Lamy does not comment on any of the first 14 moves of the game, so let's go through the opening quickly. The players play a well-known line. Bishop c4 to kick the queen back. And then rook e1. Most players first play knight b3. Topalov delays that move for one move. He plays rook e1 first, bishop e7, now knight b3, knight c6, and now white will regain the pawn on d4. A pair of knights was swapped. Black castled, c3 on move 12, bishop d7 and queen f3. Attacking the pawn on b7, queen b6 to defend that pawn, bishop b3 and a5. And here Lamy writes, black is preparing to grab a snack on b2, and it's clear that black is fine, so the French defense has served Kamsky well. He has an equal position. Bishop e3, and now you cannot play a4 to try and get that pawn on b2 because there is knight takes e6 and that's attacking the queen. So after bishop e3, Kamsky played bishop c5, and now rook a b1 is a move to defend that pawn on b2, but Lamy calls this a bit sad, and the move rook a d1 involves a pawn sacrifice that is not entirely correct, but which poses in any case difficult over the board problems, writes Lamy, and that is very much in Topalov's style. He wants a complicated position and is not worried about losing a pawn. Kamsky played a4 as planned. He's now going to win that pawn on b2. The bishop plays and that pawn is taken. Black is a pawn up. Bishop g5, knight d5 and c4, and now it gets very complex. Kamsky decides not to move his attack knight on d5. He takes on d4 instead. And now don't take that knight on d5. That would be a mistake because of queen takes c2, rook takes d4 and e takes d5, and that is better for black. So after bishop takes d4, Topalov played queen d3 instead, with a little threat on h7. That would be checkmate. Of course, Kamsky did not fall for that. He defends against a checkmate with f5, and now Topalov took on d4 with the queen. Kamsky took on c2, c takes d5, queen takes a2 and queen b6. The dust has settled, the fireworks are over, and we've reached a position with opposite colored bishops in which black has 2 extra pawns. And Grandmaster Lamy explains that the d5 pawn and the centralized pieces give white definite compensation. This is a strong pawn, and what strikes is the difference in the rooks. White's rooks nicely centralized, while black's rooks are not. a3 was Kamsky's move, bishop e7, rook fe8, queen d6 and bishop a4, and Lamy calls this an important moment in the game. After spending a big chunk of his remaining time, Kamsky nevertheless goes wrong and, more importantly, drifts into serious time trouble. Time, in my view, was the main factor in the match, writes Lamy. And bishop a4 is a mistake. Lamy explains that bishop c8 or king f7 are better options. But bishop a4 was played, and Topalov says, "Thank you very much, I will take that pawn with check." King h8, rook a1 attacking the queen, and queen went to c4. Here Lamy writes, why did white not play queen takes f5? He says, nerve-wracking moments for a second. Queen takes f5 would have given white an easy game, simply picking up a pawn while preparing the march of the d-pawn. But things always look easier behind the computer screen, and undoubtedly the pressure on the players was huge. A win would bring Kamsky alongside Topalov with a final game with white. A loss would mean the end of the match. And that was the case indeed. That's where we were in game 7. But after queen c4, Topalov did not take that pawn on f5. He played rook ec1, attacking the queen again. Bishop c2 and queen d7. And Lamy writes, Topalov is continuing in self-destruction mode. He later explains that he felt white was risking little, since b1 is still a long way to go for the b-pawn, and Kamsky was seriously running out of time. But Topalov took a risk here. This is indeed black's plan, to push that b-pawn all the way to b1, but Kamsky had very little time, even though he has a very good position here. a2 was played by Kamsky, d6, there goes the d-pawn, and indeed b7, b5, the b-pawn marches forward. Queen b7, and now rook e2, b8, and that is a mistake. Lamy explains that black should have played b4 here, keep running with the pawn, and then he gives this variation, d7, rook e2, b8, then you can promote to a queen, rook takes, bishop takes, and rook takes, and black is winning with his very strong queenside pawns for the exchange. And if Kamsky indeed had won this game, he would have equalized the match, and in the last game of the match he would have had the white pieces. But after queen b7, Kamsky did not play b5, b4, he played rook e2, b8, a mistake. Queen c7 and rook c8, and now black is even lost. Lamy explains that with bishop d3 or bishop e4, black should have been able to keep this game to a draw. But he played rook c8, and now white wins. With queen takes c4, swapping the queens, rook takes, and d7. And as Lamy writes, clinching a full rook and the match. And Topalov was right, the black b-pawn is still very far from b1. What can you do with black? A move like rook d4 to control the promotion square does not work, as it leaves this bishop on c2 unprotected. For example, promotion, rook takes, rook takes, but then that bishop falls off the board and white is a rook up. So that does not work for black. So what to do? Kamsky played bishop b1. And here you should not promote. Topalov didn't do that. Why is that bad? Because of rook takes. And if you then take with the bishop, then you get checkmated on the bottom rank. We don't want to see that if we're white. So after bishop b1 you cannot promote yet, and Lamy gives a very nice variation. He says white can take on c4, that is winning, b takes c4, and then you can promote, rook takes, bishop takes, c3, bishop e5 and c2, And Lamy says this is a curious position when white wins by carefully maneuvering his king to b3 and then releasing the rook by taking on a2. Topalov would undoubtedly have won this game with that maneuver, but he played rook d1 instead of taking on c4, and Lamy agrees that this is much easier. White is winning now. King g8, the pawn gets promoted, rook takes, bishop takes, and as Lamy writes, the rest is easy. White has an extra rook for 2 pawns. That rook is for the moment buried on a1, but Topalov shows the technique to win this position. If you play a move like king f7 with black, then white will sacrifice that rook. Rook takes, a takes queen, and rook takes b1, and this is an easy winning position for white with an extra piece for only 1 pawn. In the game after bishop takes d8, Kramsky played bishop c2, attacking the rook, rook dc1, there goes the b pawn, rook takes a2 and b3, rook a8, king f7, rook b8 behind the passed pawn, king e6, rook check, king d5, bishop e7, rook a4, bishop f8, and you cannot play rook a2, well you can, but then there is bishop takes g7, and that b2 square is firmly controlled by white. The b pawn will not go anywhere. So after bishop f8, rook a2 does not work. Rook a7 was Kramsky's last move, and he resigned after h2, h4. Black is a rook down, and the b pawn, which is his only compensation, is under lock and key. It will not be able to advance. So Topalov won the only match he had to win to become world champion, Anand's second challenger after Anand beat Kramnik in 2008. That match will be played the year after in 2010, also in Sofia in Bulgaria, and I cover that match in my series on the World Championship matches. You can find a link to the video on the 2010 event up here. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you'll keep counting down towards the resumption of the candidates tournament with me. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.